Welcome to Campfire Stories.
Pull in close to the fire, friends. For tonight we hoist the black flag and sail into the golden age of piracy, and we begin with the most feared name of them all, a man who was a pirate for scarcely 2 years and yet became the very picture of the word forever after. His name was Edward Teach, though the world remembers him as Blackbeard, and tonight we tell of the morning the king's men finally came for him. This is the last stand of Blackbeard Carol, and it is a bloody one.
Blackbeard. Oh, Marty, there it is, the name every child knows. Only 2 years a pirate, you say? I always imagined a lifetime of it. What made a man so famous, so fast?
Theater, Carol, as much as terror. Teach understood that a frightened enemy surrenders without a fight, and a surrender without a fight means no one gets hurt and the plunder comes easy. So he built himself into a living nightmare. He was a big man to begin with a great thick black beard that he grew up to his very eyes and twisted into little tails with ribbons. And when he went into battle, he would tuck lengths of slow-burning cannon fuse under the brim of his hat, so that his whole head wreathed itself in smoke, and out of that smoke glared his eyes and a brace of pistols across his chest. Men said the devil himself had come aboard.
Smoke curling around his face like something out of the underworld. Marty, that is the cleverest kind of fearsome, isn't it? Frightening on purpose so he needn't actually kill. Did he have a great ship to match the legend?
He did, Carol. He took a big French vessel and mounted 40 guns upon her and named her the Queen Anne's Revenge, and with her he ruled the waters off the Carolinas and the Caribbean. And he did a thing so bold it still astonishes. In the year 1718 he sailed his flotilla right up to the harbor of Charlestown, the richest port in the southern colonies, and he blockaded it. He stopped the ships coming and going, took hostages from among the passengers, and sent word ashore that he would start sending heads to the governor unless his demands were met. And what did the terror of the seas demand, Carol? A chest of medicine.
Medicine, of all things. Marty, that is strangely human, isn't it? The great pirate holding a whole city to ransom because his crew was sick. Did he get it?
He got it, and sailed off unharmed, Carol, which tells you how helpless the colonies were before him. But not long after, his luck with the sea turned. He ran the Queen Anne's Revenge aground on a sandbar at an inlet and lost her, and some say he wrecked her on purpose, to thin out his own crew and keep more of the treasure for a favored few. And then Blackbeard did something surprising. He sailed up to North Carolina, and he accepted a royal pardon, and he settled down, Carol, in the town of Bath, and made himself very comfortable indeed with a crooked governor who was happy to look the other way for a share.
So the monster retired and made friends with the governor. Marty, I have a feeling that cozy arrangement did not sit well with everybody.
It did not sit well at all with the governor of the neighboring colony of Virginia, a hard man named Alexander Spotswood, who did not believe a wolf ever truly changes his coat. Spotswood decided that even if Blackbeard was legally pardoned in Carolina, he would send the king's navy to end him. He gave the task to a young and determined lieutenant of the Royal Navy named Robert Maynard, and Maynard took 2 small sloops crowded with sailors and went hunting. On the night before the fight, they found Blackbeard at anchor in a shallow, treacherous place called Ocracoke Inlet.
A young lieutenant against the devil of the seas in the pirate's own waters. Marty, my heart is in my throat. How did the battle begin?
With cunning on both sides, Carol. At first light on the 22nd of November, Maynard's sloops went in and promptly ran aground on the shifting sands, and Blackbeard raked them with a broadside of cannon that killed and wounded a fearful number of the sailors at once. And now Maynard did the shrewdest thing of the whole affair. He ordered most of his surviving men to go below decks and hide, and he left only himself and a couple of others visible on the bloody, shattered deck. To Blackbeard, drifting close, it looked as though the fight was all but won and the sloop was his for the boarding.
Oh, that is a trap baited with dead men. So Blackbeard climbed aboard thinking he had won.
He came over the rail roaring Carol with his boarding party into what looked like a slaughter already finished. And Maynard blew a whistle, and up from below came the hidden sailors in a flood, and the deck erupted into the most savage hand-to-hand fight the age of piracy ever saw. Blackbeard and Maynard came face to face and fired their pistols, and then went at each other with cutlasses, and Maynard's blade snapped, and it looked for a moment as though the legend would win. But the sailors swarmed the pirate. And here, Carol, is the measure of the man's ferocity. When they finally counted, Edward Teach had taken 5 pistol balls in his body and near 20 deep cuts from the blades, and he was still swinging when he fell.
5 bullets and 20 sword cuts before he went down. Marty, no wonder they thought he was more than a man. It took a whole crew and all of that to kill him.
It did, Carol, and Maynard wanted the world to be certain of it. He had Blackbeard's head cut off and lashed to the bowsprit at the front of his ship, and he sailed home to Virginia with that grim trophy hanging over the water for all to see, and collected the bounty on it. And then the legend, which never lets a good story rest, began to grow one last dark bloom. The sailors swore that when they threw the headless body over the side, it did not simply sink. They swore it swam. Round and round the ship it went, they said 3 times, before it slipped at last beneath the black water of Ocracoke.
The headless body swimming round the ship. Marty, of course they said that, and of course we half believe it, because a man that hard to kill ought to give the sea one more turn. What is the meaning you draw from Blackbeard's end?
This, Carol. Edward Teach built his whole terrible fame on fear, on the smoke and the beard and the reputation, and for 2 short years it made him a king of the water without his ever having to be the killer his legend claimed. But fear has a shelf life. Sooner or later somebody stops being afraid, somebody like a stubborn young lieutenant with a whistle and a boatload of hidden men, and then all that is left is the fight itself, and the smoke blows away. The most frightening man on the seas died on a little sloop in a shallow inlet, cut to pieces, and his head swung from a beam like a lantern. I'm Marty Shepherd.
And I'm Carol, and tonight I will be thinking of the smoke curling round that terrible face, and the young man brave enough to look through it and see only a man after all. Fear is a costume, friends, and costumes come off. Come back to the fire.
Welcome to Campfire Stories.
Draw close again, friends. For last we spoke of the most feared pirate who ever lived, and tonight we speak of the most successful, a man far less famous than Blackbeard, and yet 10 times the plunderer. His name was Bartholomew Roberts, though history calls him Black Bart, and in a career of only about 3 years he took more than 400 ships. No pirate before or since came close. And the strangest part, Carol, is that he never wanted to be a pirate at all.
400 ships. Marty, that is not a career, that is an industry, and he was dragged into it against his will? Tell me how a reluctant man becomes the king of all the pirates.
He was a Welshman, Carol, a sober and skilled navigator, third mate on a slave ship off the coast of West Africa, minding his own business, when his vessel was captured by a pirate named Howell Davis. The pirates pressed the best of the captured sailors into their crew, whether they liked it or not, and Roberts liked it not at all. But then, only weeks later, Davis was killed in an ambush, and the pirate crew needed a new captain. And they looked around at this quiet, clever navigator who had been among them for barely 6 weeks, and they elected him. He is said to have shrugged and remarked that if he was to be a pirate, it was better to be a commander than a common man.
6 weeks from prisoner to captain. Marty, that says something about the man, that even his captors could see the quality in him at once. And what kind of pirate king did this reluctant navigator turn out to be?
A most unusual one, Carol. He did not carouse like the others. Blackbeard drank tea, if you can believe it, when the whole crew was awash in rum, and he kept the Sabbath after a fashion, and he was said to be a man of fine and elegant dress. In battle he wore a rich crimson damask waistcoat and breeches, a hat with a red feather, a great gold chain about his neck with a diamond cross hanging from it, and a brace of pistols slung on a silk sash. He looked less like a sea robber Carol than like a prince going to a ball, and he fought with a cold, brilliant daring that his crews would follow anywhere.
Tea and a diamond cross and a red feather. Marty, he sounds magnificent, like an actor who wandered onto the wrong ship and decided to run it. Did he have rules, this elegant king, or was it all chaos?
He had a code, Carol, and this is one of the finest things about him, and about pirates in general, which surprises most folk. He drew up written articles that every man of his company had to swear to. Every man had a vote in the affairs of the moment. Every man got his fair share of the plunder, with the captain and officers taking only a little extra. Lights and candles out by 8 in the evening. No gambling for money aboard. No women brought aboard in disguise. And provision made, Carol, for any man crippled in the service a set sum of money so he would not be cast aside. It was, in its rough way, more democratic and more caring than the navy or the merchant ships these men had fled.
A pension for the wounded and a vote for every man. Marty, I did not expect to admire a pirate's rule book, but there it is. So he sailed under his code and took his 400 ships. Where did all that boldness finally run out?
Off the coast of West Africa, Carol, in February of 1722, and it ran out on a morning when Blackbeard's luck and his cold judgment both failed him at once. A Royal Navy warship, the Swallow, under a determined captain named Challoner Ogle, came upon his fleet. Ogle was a clever hunter. He pretended at first to flee, drawing one of Robert's ships away and capturing it out of sight, then came back and fell upon Roberts himself. And here is the sorrowful detail. The night before had been one of hard celebration, and many of Robert's crew were the worse for drink and slow to their stations when the fight came.
The one rule they broke was sobriety on the one morning it mattered most.
Oh, Marty.
And their elegant captain, in his crimson and his gold, what did he do?
He did what he always did, Carol. He dressed in his finest, that crimson damask and the feathered hat and the diamond cross, and he came up on deck to fight his ship like the king he was. And in the first exchange of fire, a blast of grape shot from the Swallow caught Bartholomew Roberts full in the throat, and he fell dead against the tackle of a gun, killed in an instant before the real battle had scarcely begun. He was perhaps 40 years old, and in 3 years he had become the terror of 2 oceans, and it was over in a heartbeat.
Struck down in his finery in the first minutes before he could even fight. Marty, there is something almost merciful in how quick it was, and something terribly sad, too. What did his crew do, seeing their king fall?
They did the last thing he had asked of them, Carol, for he had told them plainly that he never wished his body to be taken and hung up in chains for the crowds to jeer at, as they did to captured pirates. So his men, even in the chaos of a losing fight, took up the body of Blackbeard in all his crimson splendor, weighted it, and cast it over the side into the sea before the navy could lay a hand on it. And to this day no one knows where in those African waters the greatest pirate of them all went down. He simply vanished into the deep in his diamond cross, and the sea kept him.
They gave him to the ocean rather than to his enemies. Marty, that is loyalty, isn't it? Right to the end. And with the king dead, I imagine the golden age was dying too.
You have put your finger on it exactly, Carol. Historians often mark the death of Bartholomew Roberts as the very end of the golden age of piracy. The navies were growing stronger, the pardons and the gallows were thinning the ranks, and when the most successful pirate who ever lived could be swept away in a single blast of grape shot, the writing was on the wall for all the rest. The captured survivors of his crew were tried, and many hanged. The great days were done. And that is the meaning I take from Blackbeard Carol. He was proof that a pirate could be brilliant, disciplined, even principled after his fashion, and it still ended the same way, because a life built on plunder has only ever one final port. I'm Marty Shepherd.
And I'm Carol, and tonight I'm thinking of the elegant Welshman in his crimson coat, sober amid all that ruin given to the sea by loyal hands so no jeering crowd could ever have him. Live by your own code, friends, but know where the road ends and come back to the fire.
Welcome to Campfire Stories.
Come in close, friends, for tonight's tale has two hearts to it, and both of them belong to women, in a world that swore a woman had no place on a fighting ship at all. In the year 1720, on the sunlit water off Jamaica, when a crew of pirates was cornered at last, it was two women who stood and fought while the men hid below. Their names were Anne Bonny and Mary Read Carol, and they are the most famous women pirates who ever lived.
Two women fighting while the men hid. Oh, Marty, I have been waiting my whole life to have this one told properly. Where do we start with which of them?
Let us start with Anne Bonny Carol, a fierce, red-haired Irishwoman who had crossed to the American colonies as a girl. She had a famous temper, and she made a poor marriage to a small-time sailor, and the two of them drifted to the pirate haven of Nassau in the Bahamas. And there, in that lawless port, Anne met a flashy, charming pirate captain named John Rackham, whom everyone called Calico Jack for the bright printed cotton clothes he loved to wear. Anne left her husband, threw in her lot with Calico Jack, and went to sea as a pirate, fighting and drinking and plundering right alongside the men.
She simply walked out of one life and into a pirate's, Marty. The nerve of her. And where does Mary Read come into it? Was she already aboard?
She came later, Carol, and her story is stranger still, for Mary Read had spent much of her whole life disguised as a man. Her mother had dressed her as a boy in childhood for reasons of inheritance, and Mary took to it. As a young woman, she served as a soldier in the army in men's clothes and fought bravely, and even fell in love and married. But when her husband died, she put the men's clothes back on and went to sea. And by chance the ship she sailed on was taken by Calico Jack's pirates, and Mary, still believed by all to be a man, joined the crew.
So there were now two women aboard, and only one of them knew it. Marty, how on earth did they find each other out?
Ah, this is the delicious part, Carol. Anne Bonny, who did not know Mary Read was a woman, took a great liking to this handsome young sailor and began to make advances. And Mary, to fend her off, quietly revealed the truth that she too was a woman in disguise. And instead of jealousy, there grew a fast and fierce friendship between them, two women keeping each other's secret in the middle of a pirate crew. Calico Jack, the story goes, grew jealous of all the time Anne spent with this young sailor, until she let him in on the secret too, to keep the peace.
A friendship forged out of a misunderstanding in the one place you would least expect it. Marty, I love them already. Were they only along for the ride, or did they truly fight?
They truly fought, Carol, and by every account, they fought harder than the men. When there was boarding to be done, when the pistols and the cutlasses came out, Anne Bonny and Mary Read were in the thick of it, cursing and swinging with the best of the crew, and the sailors who survived to testify said as much in court. These were not passengers. These were pirates in full, as bloody and bold as any man on that deck. And for a season they had the run of the Caribbean, small prizes and good living, until the law came for Calico Jack's little ship.
And here we come back to where you began, Marty, the day they were cornered. Tell me about the fight off Jamaica.
It was late in 1720, Carol, and a pirate hunter named Jonathan Barnett came upon Calico Jack's sloop in the night, anchored off the Jamaican coast. And the men of the crew, Carol, including the flashy captain himself, had been drinking hard deep in their cups, and when the fight came they were useless. They scrambled down into the hold to hide and left the deck to whoever would hold it. And who held it? Two women. Anne Bonny and Mary Read stood on that open deck and fought Barnett's boarders, firing and slashing, and it is said that Mary Read, in a fury at the cowards below, fired her pistol down into the hold at her own hiding crewmates and cursed them to come up and fight like men.
She fired at her own crew for hiding. Marty, that is rage and courage both, and it tells you everything about what she thought of those men. But two against a boarding party, they could not win.
They could not, Carol. They were overwhelmed and taken, the whole crew, and hauled to Jamaica to stand trial. Calico Jack and the men were swiftly condemned to hang. And there is a line, Carol, that has come ringing down the centuries. On the morning Calico Jack was to be executed, he was allowed to see Anne Bonny one last time. And she looked at the man she had run away to sea with, now bound for the gallows, and instead of tears she gave him this. She said she was sorry to see him there, but if he had fought like a man, he need not have hanged like a dog.
If he had fought like a man, he need not hang like a dog. Oh, Marty. Cold and true and unforgettable. She had more iron in her than the whole crew. So the men hanged. What became of the two women?
Here the tale turns, Carol, because the two women were not hanged with the men, and for a very particular reason. When they were sentenced, both Anne Bonny and Mary Read declared that they were with child, and the law of the time would not hang an unborn babe for its mother's crimes, so their executions were stayed. It was called pleading the belly. And that plea, Carol, is very likely what saved their lives, at least for a while.
Even at the end they found a way to fight, this time with the law itself. Marty, please tell me at least one of them lived.
The truth is bittersweet and a little mysterious, Carol, which is only fitting for these two. Poor Mary Read did not last long. She took a fever in the Jamaican prison, some say in childbirth, and she died there behind bars, never to hang and never to go free. But Anne Bonny, Carol Anne Bonny, simply vanishes from the record. There is no account of her execution, none at all. Many believe her wealthy father, back in the colonies, paid to have her quietly released, and that the fierce red-haired pirate lived out a long life under another name, an old woman with an impossible secret in her past. No one knows for certain. She sailed out of history the way she sailed into it, on her own terms.
One dies in chains and one disappears free, and we are left not knowing. Marty, in a strange way, I love that we do not know, that Anne gets to keep the last secret. What is the meaning you take from the two of them?
This, Carol. In an age that told women they were too weak, too soft, too frightened for the hard and violent world of men, two women went to the hardest and most violent corner of it there was, and when the moment of truth came, it was they who stood on the deck and the men who cowered below. I do not hold up their piracy as a virtue, mind. But their courage was real, and it shamed a ship full of men, and 300 years later we still say their names together, Anne Bonny and Mary Read, when the men who sailed with them are forgotten. I'm Marty Shepherd.
And I'm Carol, and tonight I'm thinking of two women back to back on a moonlit deck, fighting for their lives while braver-seeming men hid in the dark, and of a fierce old woman who may have kept her secret to the grave. Never let anyone tell you what you are too weak to do, friends, and come back to the fire.
Welcome to Campfire Stories.
Settle in by the fire, friends, for tonight's pirate is different from the rest, because Captain William Kidd may not have been much of a pirate at all, and yet his name became a byword for buried treasure, and he died on the gallows for it. His is a story of a man crushed between the law and the powerful, and of a piece of paper that could have saved his life and mysteriously disappeared. This is the trial of Captain Kidd, Carol, and it is a story about who really pays when the mighty need a scapegoat.
A pirate who wasn't really a pirate hanged all the same. Marty, that already sounds like an injustice. Who was Kidd before all the trouble?
He was a respectable man, Carol. That is the wonder of it. William Kidd was a Scottish sea captain living in New York, a married man of property, well thought of. And in the 1690s he was given a most respectable commission indeed. Powerful lords in England, and even a nod from the king, backed him to go out as a privateer. Now mark that word, Carol. Privateer, for it is the whole hinge of the tale. A privateer was a legal pirate, a private captain licensed by the government to attack the ships of the enemy, and to hunt down actual pirates, and to share the takings with his powerful backers.
So he set out with the law and the lords on his side to catch pirates, not to be one. Marty, how does a man like that end up on the wrong end of a rope?
Everything went wrong at once, Carol. He sailed for the Indian Ocean in a fine ship called the Adventure Galley, but sickness and bad luck thinned his crew, and the men he had were a hard and mutinous lot who had signed on for plunder and were finding none. Month after month they took nothing, and the crew grew ugly and dangerous, muttering of mutiny. And in that pressure, Kidd made his fatal choice. He fell upon a great merchant ship called the Quedagh Merchant, heavy with cargo, and took her as a prize.
But if he was licensed to take enemy ships, why was that a crime?
Because of the flags in the papers, Carol, and here is the fine and deadly legal point. The Quedagh Merchant was sailing under passes from the French, and France was England's enemy, so on paper she was a lawful prize, and Kidd carefully kept those French passes to prove it. But the ship was in truth captained by an Englishman, and her cargo belonged in part to powerful merchants with friends in high places, and the taking of her caused an uproar all the way back to London. Suddenly the man who had gone out to catch pirates was being cried up as the greatest pirate of them all, and the powerful lords who had backed him found his name had become poison.
And so the men who sent him out to do exactly this were the very ones who needed him to be guilty. Marty, I can feel the trap closing. What did poor Kidd do?
He did the thing that should have saved him, Carol, and it damned him instead. He sailed back toward the American colonies, still believing that his powerful backers would protect him, for after all he had only done what they had licensed him to do, and he had the French passes to prove the Quedagh Merchant was a lawful prize. And along the way, near an island off Long Island called Gardiner's Island, he buried a portion of his treasure, gold and silver, meaning it as a bargaining chip, a bit of insurance. That buried chest, Carol, is the very seed of every buried pirate treasure story that has haunted the world ever since, because Kidd's was real, and it was dug up.
The real buried treasure that started 1,000 tales. Marty, so at least the treasure was found. Did it help him?
It helped hang him, Carol. His backers, far from protecting him, turned on him utterly to save their own necks and reputations. He was arrested in Boston, thrown in a foul prison, and shipped across the ocean to London to stand trial, less as a defendant than as a sacrifice. And now comes the darkest and most suspicious turn of the whole affair. The one thing that could prove his innocence, that the Quedagh Merchant had been a lawful French prize, was those French passes he had so carefully kept. And at his trial, Carol, those passes could not be found. They had vanished from the government's own papers.
The evidence that could have cleared him simply disappeared from the hands of the very people who wanted him convicted. Oh, Marty, that is no accident.
Few believe it was, Carol. And here is the coda that turns the stomach. More than 200 years later, long after Kidd was dust, those very French passes were discovered, misfiled away in the British archives all along. The proof had existed the whole time. But at the trial in 1701 it was nowhere to be had, and without it Kidd stood defenseless. He was convicted not only of piracy but of the murder of one of his own crewmen, a gunner named William Moore, whom Kidd had struck on the head with a heavy wooden bucket in a quarrel during those desperate, mutinous months.
So they had him on the piracy with the evidence hidden, and on the killing of his own man in a moment of rage. Marty, tell me about the end. I fear it was a hard one.
It was hard even by the standards of the age, Carol. They took him to execution dock at Wapping, on the edge of the Thames, where they hanged pirates at the low water mark so the tide would wash 3 times over the body. And when they dropped him, the rope broke, and Captain Kidd fell to the mud alive. A merciful world might have taken that as a sign. This world simply hauled him up and hanged him a second time, and that time it held. And then, to make an example that no sailor could miss, they coated his body in tar, bound it in iron bands, and hung it in a cage down by the river's mouth, where it swung for years as a warning to every man who sailed past.
Hanged twice, and then left to rot in a cage over the water. Marty, whatever he did or did not do, that is a terrible amount of vengeance for one man. What is the meaning you take from Captain Kidd?
This, Carol, and it is why his story sits a little apart from the swaggering tales of Blackbeard and Black Bart. William Kidd was very likely no great pirate at all, only an ordinary man given an impossible job by powerful people, who made a bad decision under terrible pressure, and then trusted the mighty to stand by him. And the mighty, when the wind changed, needed a neck to hang the whole scandal on, and his was closest. The evidence that could have saved him went conveniently missing. He died so that greater men could keep their reputations and their gold. And the only treasure of his that anyone ever truly found was the little he buried out of fear, which became, of all things, the legend that made him immortal. I'm Marty Shepherd.
And I'm Carol, and tonight I'm thinking of a respectable captain who trusted the powerful and learned too late that the powerful do not hang beside you. Keep your own proof close, friends, and be wary whose promises you sail on. Come back to the fire.
Welcome to Campfire Stories.
Come in out of the dark, friends, and lean close, for most of our pirate tales end on a gallows or under the waves. But tonight we tell of the one who got away. Henry, pulled off perhaps the richest single robbery in the whole history of piracy, set half the world hunting him, and then simply vanished off the face of the earth with his plunder, and was never ever caught. They called him the arch-pirate and Long Ben Carol, and his is the great escape.
The one who got away clean. Oh, Marty, after Kidd hanged in a cage, I could use a story where the pirate wins. What was this great robbery of his?
To understand it, Carol, you must picture the richest empire on earth at that time, the empire of the Grand Mughal of India, wealthy beyond a European's wildest dreams. And once a year a great fleet of the Mughal ships would sail home from the holy pilgrimage to Mecca, laden with treasure and pilgrims. The jewel of that fleet was an enormous treasure ship, the Ganges Sawai, a floating fortune of gold and silver and gems carrying, it was said, members of the Mughals' own court. And in the year 1695 this ordinary English sailor named Henry Every set out to take her.
One pirate captain against the treasure ship of the mightiest empire on earth. Marty, the sheer nerve. How did a common sailor even come to lead such a thing?
By mutiny, Carol. Every was first mate on a privateer whose crew had gone months without pay, and one night he led them in seizing the ship for their own and turned pirate. He renamed her the Fancy, made himself captain, and sailed for the mouth of the Red Sea, where he knew the Mughals' pilgrim fleet would pass. He was not alone either. He gathered a little pack of pirate ships to lie in wait together. And when the great fleet came through in the dark, most of it slipped past, but the Fancy caught the 2 richest stragglers, a smaller treasure ship first, and then the giant herself, the Ganges Sawai.
So he actually caught her? Marty, a huge Mughal warship, must have been able to fight back. How did a stolen privateer take a prize like that?
She could fight, Carol, and she should have won, for she was bigger and better armed. But fortune turned against her in the first minutes. One of the great ship's own cannon burst as it fired, killing her own gunners and throwing the defenders into chaos, and a lucky shot from the Fancy brought down the treasure ship's mainmast. And in the confusion, the pirates swarmed aboard. And now, Carol, I must tell you the hard truth of it, because this is not a merry tale of plunder. What followed on the decks of the Ganjai Sawai was days of horror, the pirates torturing the crew for hidden valuables and committing terrible cruelties against the passengers, many of them helpless pilgrims. It was one of the ugliest episodes of the whole pirate age, and we should not dress it up.
No, we should not, Marty. It is easy to forget, under all the treasure and adventure, that these were violent, brutal men and real people suffered. Thank you for saying it plainly. So they took the fortune. What happened when the world found out?
The world erupted, Carol. The plunder was almost beyond counting, a fortune worth many millions in today's money, shared out so that every ordinary pirate aboard suddenly had wealth beyond anything he could have earned in a lifetime of honest sailing. But the Grand Mughal was enraged, and rightly, and he came near to throwing the English trading company out of India altogether, which would have ruined a great and powerful business. So to save that trade, the English crown put an enormous bounty on Henry Every's head and launched what many call the first worldwide manhunt in history, wanted posters and rewards spreading across the seas from India to the Americas to the British Isles.
The first worldwide manhunt, all for one man. Marty, with the whole world looking, how did he possibly slip through?
By being clever and quiet where his crew were loud, Carol. Every knew that a huge crew of newly rich pirates would draw every eye, so he broke his company up. He sailed the Fancy across to the Caribbean, and the men scattered in ones and twos to make their own way and spend their fortunes. And then Henry Every, the most wanted man on the seas, simply melted away. Some of his crewmen were caught and put on trial back in England, and there is a curious thing about that trial, Carol. The first jury actually acquitted them, so embarrassing was the whole affair, and the government had to try them again on another charge to get its hangings.
Even the courts did not quite want to touch it. But Every himself, Marty, where did he go? Somebody must know.
Nobody knows, Carol, and that is the glory and the frustration of the tale. He is believed to have made his way back to the British Isles, to Ireland or to England under a false name, and there the trail simply goes cold. He never spent his fortune openly, never boasted, never surfaced. The most successful pirate thief in history, hunted by the whole world, walked into the crowd and was gone, and no gallows, no cage, no watery grave ever claimed him that anyone can prove.
He just became an ordinary man in a crowd forever. Marty, that is almost eerie, the completeness of it. But you have a certain look. Is there a sting in the tale?
There is a rumor of one, Carol, and it is the kind of ending the old storytellers loved. For all we know, Henry, Every lived out a long and comfortable life on his stolen fortune, laughing at the world. But there is a persistent legend that says otherwise, that when he came home and tried to turn his diamonds and gold into ordinary money through a group of merchants, those merchants realized exactly who he was, and that he could never dare report them, and so they simply cheated him, took his treasure, and paid him next to nothing. And the legend says the arch-pirate, who robbed the richest empire on earth and escaped the whole world's justice, died at last a poor and forgotten man, unable to prove he had ever owned a thing.
Robbed by respectable merchants because he could not go to the law himself. Oh, Marty, if that is true, it is a perfect and terrible kind of justice. The thief with no one to steal his stolen goods back from. What meaning do you take from Henry Every?
This, Carol. We tell his story because he is the one who got away, and there is a sneaking thrill in that. But look closely, and the escape rings hollow. Whatever he won, he could never truly enjoy, because a fortune you cannot explain is a fortune you cannot spend in the light. He may have died rich and hidden, or poor and cheated, but either way he spent the rest of his days as a ghost, unable to be who he was, jumping at every knock on the door. He escaped the noose, Carol, and walked straight into a prison of his own making, and the door of it was the loot itself. I'm Marty Shepherd.
And I'm Carol, and tonight I am thinking of the most wanted man in the world, melting into a crowd, rich beyond dreams, and unable to say so to a living soul. Some escapes are their own kind of cage, friends. Come back to the fire.
Welcome to Campfire Stories.
Gather in, close friends, for tonight we tell not of one pirate but of a whole city of them, a lawless little kingdom on a sunny island where for a dozen wild years the black flag flew over the harbor and no king's writ ran at all. On the island of New Providence in the Bahamas, in a ramshackle port called Nassau, the pirates built themselves a home, and they half-jokingly called it a republic. This is the rise and fall of the pirate republic, Carol, the beating heart of the whole golden age.
A whole town of pirates governing themselves. Marty, I did not know such a place ever truly existed outside of stories. How did it come to be?
Out of the wreckage of a war, Carol, and a very good harbor. Nassau sat perfectly placed astride the shipping lanes where the treasure of the Americas flowed back toward Europe, and its harbor was just deep enough for the pirates' small, nimble sloops but too shallow for the great warships of the Navy to come in after them. When a long war ended around 1715, it threw thousands of hard-trained sailors and privateers out of work all at once, men who knew only the sea and the gun. And they drifted to Nassau where there was no governor, no law, no one to stop them, and they simply took the place over.
So the harbor kept the Navy out, and a war set all those fighting men loose with nothing to do. Marty, it is almost as if the age built its own pirate den on purpose. Who ruled this republic if there was no law?
No one ruled it, Carol, and everyone did, and that was the strange charm of the place. The pirates governed themselves by a rough code, much as they did aboard their ships, by vote and by custom, and by the sharp edge of reputation. The great captains of the age all passed through and made it their base. Benjamin Hornigold, one of the first and craftiest. Charles Vane, cruel and defiant. Calico Jack Rackham, and with him in time Anne Bonny and Mary Red. And a young man learning his trade under Hornigold who would soon become the most feared of them all, a fellow named Edward Teach, whom the world would come to know as Blackbeard.
They were all there together, in one town. Marty, it must have been the most dangerous and the most alive place on earth.
What was it actually like to walk its streets?
A glorious, filthy, roaring shambles, Carol, by every account. Nassau had no fine buildings to speak of, mostly tents and driftwood shacks and the burned-out ruins of an old fort, and it stank in the heat, and it rang day and night with drinking and gambling and fighting and the spending of stolen gold. But for the men who lived there, it was something they had never had anywhere else. A merchant sailor or a navy man lived under brutal discipline, cheated of his pay, flogged at an officer's whim. In Nassau he was free, he had a vote, he shared the plunder fairly, and he answered to no lord on earth. It was a hard and violent freedom, but it was freedom, and they loved it fiercely.
A rough freedom they could get nowhere else. Marty, I begin to understand why they clung to it. But a place like that, thumbing its nose at the king and choking the trade routes, surely the crown could not let it stand forever.
It could not, Carol, and the king at last found exactly the right man to end it. His name was Woodes Rogers, and he was no ordinary official. He had himself been a daring privateer captain, a man who had sailed clear around the world and rescued a marooned sailor whose story helped inspire the tale of Robinson Crusoe. Rogers knew the sea, and he knew hard men. And in 1718, the crown made him the first royal governor of the Bahamas and sent him to Nassau, not merely with warships, but with something cleverer. He carried the king's pardon.
A pardon, not just cannon. Marty, that is shrewd, isn't it? Offering the carrot and the stick at once.
How did the pirates take it?
It split them right down the middle, Carol, which was exactly the point. When Rogers sailed into that harbor, many of the pirates, tired men who could see which way the wind was finally blowing, came forward and swore the oath and took the pardon and gave up the life. Old Benjamin Hornigold not only took the pardon but turned pirate hunter and went out to catch his former friends for the crown. But the fierce ones would not bend. Charles Vane, defiant to the last, is said to have set a captured ship ablaze and sent it drifting at Rogers' fleet in the night, and then slipped out of the harbor with his guns blazing rather than kneel, and fled to keep up the old life a while longer.
So some knelt and some ran, and the Republic simply came apart from the inside. Marty, there is something both triumphant and sad in that. Did Rogers make it stick?
He made it stick, Carol, though it nearly killed him to do it. He rebuilt the fort. He faced down threats and disease and near mutiny. He hanged the pirates who broke their word and went back to the account, and slowly, stubbornly, he brought the rule of law to that wild harbor. And when it was done, the town of Nassau took a new motto for itself, a proud line in Latin that you can still find tied to the Bahamas to this day. Expulsus piratus, restituta commercia. The pirates expelled, commerce restored. The pirate republic was over.
The pirates expelled, commerce restored. Marty, in a few Latin words, the whole end of an era. And the great captains who had made the place, what became of them all?
They scattered to the fates we have been telling all season, Carol. Blackbeard sailed off to his bloody last stand at Ocracoke. Vane was eventually caught and hanged. Calico Jack and his 2 women pirates were run down off Jamaica. The free city that had launched them all emptied out, and within a very few years the Golden Age itself was guttering to its end. Nassau became just another orderly colonial port, and the roaring, stinking, gloriously free pirate republic passed into legend, gone almost as suddenly as it had risen.
Risen from a war and a good harbor, and swept away by one clever man with a pardon in his hand. Marty, what is the meaning you take from the whole rise and fall of it?
This, Carol. The pirate republic is a mirror, and what you see in it depends on where you stand. Look one way, and it is a den of thieves and cruel men, a plague on honest trade that richly deserved to be swept away, and so it was. But look another way, and you see a few thousand of the age's most abused and disposable men, sailors treated like cattle by their betters, who carved out one brief place on earth where they could be free and equal and answer to no master, and they held it for a dozen roaring years before the world closed its fist. Both things are true at once, Carol. That is why we still tell it. I'm Marty Shepherd.
And I'm Carol, and tonight I'm thinking of that ramshackle harbor full of black flags and the fierce, doomed, hard-won freedom of the men who built it. Freedom is a wild thing, friends, and it is never held for long. Come back to the fire.
Welcome to Campfire Stories.
Coming close, friends, for tonight's pirate is the oddest of the whole rogues gallery, a man who had no business at all upon the account, no need of money, no skill at the sea, and no talent for cruelty, and who threw away a comfortable life to fly the black flag anyway. His name was Stede Bonnet, and history calls him the gentleman pirate, and his tale is part comedy and part tragedy, and wholly strange. Settle in, Carol, for the pirate who did everything wrong.
A gentleman who chose to become a pirate for no reason at all. Marty, that goes against everything we have heard all season. Who was he before this madness took him?
He was about the last man on earth you would expect, Carol. Stede Bonnet was a wealthy and educated landowner on the sunny island of Barbados, a retired army major with a fine plantation, a respectable position in society, a wife and children. he wanted for nothing. He had never sailed a ship in anger in his life, knew next to nothing of navigation or gunnery or the hard trade of the sea. And one day, in the year 1717, this settled middle-aged gentleman simply decided to become a pirate and set about it in the most gentlemanly and wrong-headed way imaginable.
I have to ask the question everyone is thinking, Marty. Why? What makes a rich man with a family run off to rob ships?
No one knows for certain, Carol, and that is part of the fun and the sadness of it. The unkind story, whispered even in his own day, was that Major Bonnet was fleeing a difficult and nagging wife, and that he preferred the perils of the open sea to another evening at his own dinner table. Others think it was a kind of restlessness, what we might now call a crisis of the middle years, a respectable man aching for one wild adventure before the end. Whatever it was, Carol, he did the thing no real pirate ever did. He did not steal a ship. He bought one, out of his own pocket, a fine sloop he named the Revenge. And he did not lure a crew with promises of plunder. He hired them and paid them wages, like a shopkeeper.
He bought his pirate ship and paid his pirates a salary. Marty, that is so absurd it is almost sweet. It is like a man playing at pirates with real money. How did he possibly fare out there?
Badly, Carol, at first, and then worse. He had some early luck robbing a few merchant ships off the American coast, more by boldness than by skill. But he did not know how to handle his vessel or his men, and it showed. And then his fortunes took a turn that would prove the ruin of him. He fell in with the most famous pirate of the age, none other than Blackbeard himself. And Blackbeard took one look at this bumbling gentleman amateur and saw an opportunity.
Oh, Marty, number pudding, poor clumsy steed Bonnet next to Blackbeard is like putting a lamb next to a wolf. What did Blackbeard do to him?
He fleeced him, gently and completely, Carol. Blackbeard, all charm, suggested that Bonnet, being a gentleman unused to the hard labor of command, should come aboard Blackbeard's own ship as a guest and take his ease, and let one of Blackbeard's officers handle the tiresome business of captaining the Revenge. And Bonnet, flattered, agreed. And so the gentleman pirate found himself a passenger on another man's ship, while Blackbeard quietly ran his sloop and his crew for him. He had been relieved of his command as neatly as a purse is lifted at a fair, and he scarcely seemed to notice until it was done.
He was captain of nothing on his own ship, a guest in his own adventure. Marty, my heart genuinely aches for the man. Did he ever get free of Blackbeard?
He did, Carol, after Blackbeard finally cast him and his crew loose. And for a moment there was a chance of a soft landing. A pardon was being offered to pirates who would give up the life, and Steady Bonnet took it, and might have sailed quietly home to Barbados and his plantation, and even his difficult wife, an eccentric old story to tell at dinner. But the pull of the account had gotten into him, Carol. He could not let it go. He went back to piracy, and to dodge the terms of his pardon he took on a foolish alias. He began calling himself Captain Thomas, as if a false name could hide a face already known up and down the coast.
He had his way out and he turned back to the sea. Marty, that is the tragedy showing through the comedy now, isn't it? A man who could not stop. How did it end for Captain Thomas?
It ended in a long, desperate fight in a river, Carol. The colony of South Carolina, sick of pirates preying on its trade, sent out a determined militia colonel named William Rhett to hunt Bonnet down. Rhett cornered him at the mouth of the Cape Fear River, and there they fought a grinding battle among the sandbars, both sides running aground, blazing away at each other for hours across the mud as the tide shifted. In the end, Bonnet's men were beaten and taken, and the gentleman pirate was hauled to Charleston in chains to stand trial for his life.
Run aground in the mud and finally taken. Marty, given how gentle and hapless he was, surely a court might have shown him some mercy.
You would think so, Carol, and his story nearly took one more strange turn, for he actually escaped from his confinement in Charleston and was on the run for a short while before being recaptured. But the judge who tried him, a stern man named Nicholas Trott, had no mercy to spare. Piracy was a plague on the colony's lifeblood, and an example had to be made, gentleman or no gentleman. Trott convicted him and sentenced him to hang. And it is said that Stede Bonnet, who had begun his piracy almost as a lark, went to pieces at the end, weeping and pleading and utterly broken, all his gentleman's dignity gone. And in December of 1718 they hanged him in Charleston, this retired major who had thrown away everything for a taste of the pirate life.
Weeping at the last, all the play gone out of the game. Oh, Marty, that is a hard, sad picture. What are we to make of Stede Bonnet, of all these wild men the least suited to the life he chose?
I find him the most human of the lot, Carol, and the most cautionary. Blackbeard and Black Bart were made for the account, hard men in a hard trade. But Stede Bonnet was one of us, an ordinary comfortable person who looked at his safe and respectable life and found it unbearable, and hungered so badly for adventure and escape that he sailed straight past every warning into a world he had no gift for at all. There is a little of that hunger in most of us, Carol, the itch to blow up the settled life and run off to sea. Bonnet is the fellow who actually did it, and his end reminds us why most of us, wisely, only dream it. I'm Marty Shepherd.
And I'm Carol, and tonight I'm thinking of the gentleman major who paid wages to his pirates and lost his ship to a smiling wolf and threw away a whole good life for one wild dream. Mind the difference between the dream and the doing, friends. Come back to the fire.
Welcome to Campfire Stories.
For the last tale of our pirate season, friends, draw in close, because we have saved the greatest for the end. And the greatest pirate who ever lived was not Blackbeard, nor Black Bart, nor any of the swaggering men of the Caribbean. The most successful pirate in all of history was a woman, half a world away, who commanded more ships and more men than most nations owned, who fought off 3 empires, and who did the one thing almost no pirate ever managed. She retired, rich and free and unpunished, and died an old woman in her bed. Her name, Carol, was Ching Shi.
The greatest pirate who ever lived was a woman, and she won. Oh, Marty, after a whole season of gallows and shipwrecks, tell me everything. Where does her story begin?
It begins in the most unlikely place, Carol, in the floating brothels of the southern Chinese port of Canton, at the turn of the 1800s, where a young woman worked whose given name is lost to us. What we know is that she was clever and strong-willed, and she caught the eye of a powerful pirate captain named Cheng, or Zheng, who ruled a growing fleet in the South China Sea. He married her, and here's the first sign of the woman she was. She did not marry into a life of leisure. She demanded an equal share in the business and an equal hand in command, and she got it. And together they built their scattered pirate bands into a single mighty confederation.
She negotiated herself into a full partnership before she would even wed him. Marty, that is a formidable woman before the story has even begun.
What happened to the husband?
He died, Carol, lost at sea in a storm around the year 1807. And by every ordinary expectation his fleet should have splintered into a dozen quarreling pieces, as pirate empires always do when the strong man falls. But it did not. His widow moved with breathtaking speed and skill. She secured the loyalty of the key captains, made a shrewd alliance with her late husband's adopted son and right hand, a brilliant young commander, and within a very short time she had taken personal command of the entire confederation herself. And what a thing it was that she now commanded, Carol.
Tell me the size of it, Marty. You keep hinting, and I cannot picture it yet.
Then picture this, Carol, and it will stagger you. At its height, the fleet of Ching Shi numbered in the many hundreds of ships, by some accounts well over 1,000 vessels, from great ocean-going junks bristling with cannon down to little river craft. And the men and women under her command numbered in the tens of thousands, by some reckonings as many as 70 or 80,000 souls. No pirate of the Caribbean ever dreamed of such power. Blackbeard commanded a few hundred men at most. Qing Shi commanded an army and a navy that could challenge the Chinese Empire itself, and she ruled the whole coast of southern China, taxing shipping, controlling whole villages, a shadow government upon the sea.
Tens of thousands of pirates under one woman's hand. Marty, how does a person even hold such a force together? The men of the Caribbean could barely keep one crew from mutiny.
By law, Carol, and iron discipline, and this is the part I most want you to hear. Qing Shi governed her enormous fleet by a strict written code, and she enforced it without mercy, and some of her laws would surprise you. To steal from the common fund, or to give an order of your own without her leave, meant death. To desert or go absent meant the loss of your ears or your life. And here is the law that sets her apart from nearly every pirate we have spoken of all season. She laid down fierce protections for the women who were captured. A pirate who harmed a captive woman against her will was put to death. No excuses, no exceptions. In the middle of the most violent trade on earth, this pirate queen ran the tightest and, in that one respect, the most principled ship of all.
A pirate who protected captured women on pain of death. Marty, after some of what we heard earlier this season, that lands hard and it lands well. So the Empire tried to stop her, I imagine, with all that power in her hands.
They tried with everything they had, Carol, and they failed and failed again. The Imperial Chinese Navy went out against her and was beaten so badly that she captured their ships and folded them into her own fleet, so that fighting her only made her stronger. The Portuguese, with their base at Macau, went against her and could not break her. Even the mighty British, the greatest sea power on earth, are said to have taken an interest, and still she held the coast. For years, the terror of the South China Sea was simply undefeatable, and the empire that could not crush her at last began to wonder if there might be another way to be rid of her.
If you cannot beat her, you must deal with her. Marty, is this where the miracle happens? The ending you promised where she actually gets away with it?
This is where it happens, Carol, and it is a masterpiece of knowing when to stop, which is the one thing almost no pirate in history ever learned. Around the year 1810, with her fleet still powerful but with cracks beginning to show, a rivalry brewing among her captains, the Empire offered a general amnesty, a pardon to any pirate who would give up the life. And Qing Shi did not sail away defiant like Charles Vane, to be hunted down and hanged. She did not fight to the last like Blackbeard. She went herself to negotiate, and she negotiated like the shrewd businesswoman she had always been.
She walked in to bargain with the Empire that had spent years trying to destroy her. Marty, the coolness of it. What terms did she win?
Terms almost no defeated enemy in history has ever won, Carol. She and the great mass of her pirates received full pardons. They were allowed to keep their plunder, their ill-gotten fortune, free and clear. Many of her men, and her adopted son commander, whom by now she had married, were even given positions in the imperial military, their piracy transformed into respectable service with a stroke of the brush. And Qing Shi herself walked away a wealthy, free and untouched woman, the pardon in her hand and her fortune in her purse, having beaten the Empire not with cannon in the end, but with cunning at the bargaining table.
She kept the treasure, saved her men, and strolled out under a full pardon. Marty, I did not think that was allowed to happen in a pirate story. What did she do with the rest of her life?
She did the most gloriously ordinary thing imaginable, Carol. She retired. She settled down in Canton and, by the accounts that come to us, ran a gambling house, a comfortable and profitable business, and lived out a long and peaceful life as a respected matron, a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. She died in her bed at around 70 years of age, in the 1840s, wealthy and safe, surrounded by family, having never spent a day on a gallows or in a cage or beneath the waves. The most powerful pirate in the history of the world died of old age, at home, having gotten clean away with all of it.
Died an old grandmother in her own bed, rich and free. Marty, after Kid in his cage and Blackbeard's head on the bowsprit. I can hardly believe the season ends here. What is the meaning you take from Ching Shi?
This, Carol, and it is the perfect note to close our pirate fire upon. Every swaggering man we have met this season was undone in the end by the same failing, the inability to stop. They wanted one more prize, one more year on the account, and the sea or the noose took them for it. Ching Shi was greater than all of them, commanded more, fought better, ruled longer, and she alone understood that the whole point of winning is to be able to walk away while you still can. She looked at her fortune and her power and her enemies, and she knew the moment, and she took the deal, and she went home. Strength took her to the top, Carol. But it was wisdom, knowing when the game was won, that let her keep it. I'm Marty Shepherd.
And I'm Carol, and tonight I'm thinking of the pirate queen who commanded 1,000 ships and was smart enough to trade them all for a long, quiet life by the harbor she once terrorized. Know when you have won, friends, and have the wisdom to walk away. That is the end of our pirate season, so bank the fire, sleep warm, and come back to us soon.